I've seen just about everything. Seen queens overthrow kings, and straights flushed away. I felt the sweat after every re-raise, and nearly buckled after bad beats. Seen rags lead to riches, and witnessed countless miracles on the river. So if you want to play, take a seat and show me something I haven't seen. We play at FullTiltPoker.com.
This is Diego Cordovez.
Adam Schoenfeld.
Welcome to The Scoop, brought to you by Full Tilt Poker. And today we have a legendary historical figure, Jack McClelland. If you talk about tournament directors, tournament organizers, there's not very many.
And everyone's talking about
them. But he ran the World Series of Poker for about 15 years. And he runs all the tournaments at Bellagio and around the world. And more than that, he just has a lot of good stories about all the stuff he's seen. So for 15 years, you were running the World Series together with Jim Albrecht and in charge of the show. Now you're a player. I know you played this year, made the money in the seniors event. So what are the biggest differences that you see as more from a tournament director standpoint and running the show standpoint?
Well, it's gotten so big now; it's just massive. I mean, when I was running the World Series, I got to play a couple times. I made 2 final tables in the 7 Stud World Championship. I could take a half a day off and play.
That didn't create any concern that, well, one day you're the tournament director, maybe you get a favorable ruling when you're at the final table?
No, you always have to take the worst out of it.
Jack would also issue the ruling when he was in tournament.
In fact, Phil Hellmuth just wrote a new book called Deal Me In,
right?
And I did the introduction for him. So the year he won the World Championship in 1989, the year before in '88, I'd made the final table of the stud, and so optimism was kind of high. And then in '89, right in the middle of the World Series, my wife Alma, she won the Ladies World Championship.
Right, I remember.
In spite of the fact that in the afternoon she lost a big pot on a ruling made by her husband, the tournament director.
Really?
Where it was against Maria Stern of all people, and Alma had 2 pair, and Maria threw her hand down, but the dealer didn't kill the hand, and they pushed the pot to Alma, and she's stacking her chips, and the player beside her said, "Oh, you got a straight." So we turned the hand back up. I had to give her the chips. Dinner was not very much fun that night.
That's typical ladies tournament event. They can't read the hands. Is that what you're saying, Jack?
No, that's strictly on you, Adam.
All right. You mentioned Phil Hellmuth. Now, it's my impression that he's always been the way he is. Is that true? Because you knew him back when he was still a punk kid as opposed to a punk middle-aged man.
Phil Hellmuth, back in the mid-'80s when I met him, he was kind of like a diamond in the rough. Right now, Phil Hellmuth today is just a polished diamond. He's a best promoter out there and the slickest, and he's really got his act together. I'm really proud of him.
When he first came along, before he'd won all the tournaments and started telling everyone how he was the best, did you already see the potential in him right off the bat?
Well, I saw the first couple times in the World Series he'd get deep and then he'd blow up like most young kids do. They get the testosterone going or whatever. Or they think I'm a genius now, and they're going to make everybody do what they want.
Right.
But he's really come a long way with everything. One of the bracelets I remember him winning the most, besides the World Championship, was he was playing at I think it was a pot limit hold'em or a no limit hold'em. I don't remember which, but I mean it was a really tough final 4 or 5 players: Jack Keller, Mickey Appleman, somebody else, Tuna, and Jack Keller had a hand, and he just made like a small raise, and Phil called, and a flop come like tray 5 something, and Phil had a tray 5, and Jack had a pocket pair, and Phil busted him. And Phil had just read that Jack's, hand was, he was underplaying the hand. And that's when it's like, this guy gets it.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, since then he's just, went off like a meteor, and he's the top of the list right now.
We've talked a bunch of times about how at the World Series, his poor behavior stands out in this era. There are people who celebrate a lot of it, but as far as really, how he treats other players, a lot of times it's poor, or even in the tournament staff. When you were working on the World Series in the 80s, you had characters still around like Stu Unger, Johnny Moss, Puggy Pearson. Is it accurate to say that Phil gets a lot of attention now, but that overall player behavior has improved dramatically, or is that just my
player
impression?
behavior's improved dramatically since we started the penalty system.
Mm-hmm.
Phil's gotten penalties. Devilfish has gotten penalties. The master, I give him a penalty heads up in a tournament.
That could be costly.
It was. He came in second. Syracuse Chris, he used to just explode like a volcano. And there was a tournament where first place was like $500,000. They were down to like 3-4 tables. And my assistant was there, and he went off, so I gave him a 20-minute penalty. And he just wouldn't give up, so I gave him another 40-minute penalty. So after an hour, he came back, and he had no chips. And I mean, since then, Chris has been an absolute gentleman. It's like, this is going to cost me a lot of money if I keep acting stupid.
So if Stu Unger or Johnny Moss or some of these guys had been around as when the penalties came in, I think that would have rectified their behavior.
Probably the two people that most caused me the most sleepless nights,
Yeah.
and the reason I put the penalties in were probably John Benetti and Sam Grizzle.
Oh, right.
Because Sam, he just knew how to push the envelope. He could get them right to the edge and mumble in their ear. Where Benetti...
Yeah, he's a master. Benetti would be out loud.
Yeah, Benetti just be out loud. And I love John. John was a great guy. I remember one time in the championship at the Four Queens, he got a penalty. So I gave him a penalty, I know I'm going to be listening to it for days. So John stomps out of the room. So it's 20 minutes later, he comes back and he's sitting like this, staring at me. So I'm just doing my thing. He says, he says, you've given me a lot of penalties. I said, yeah. He says, and I deserved every one of them. And the whole table cracked up.
Good for him.
The tension was diffused.
Right.
And that's what I feel one of the most important things to be a successful tournament director is you don't go pour gasoline on a problem, you go and you try to diffuse it.
Yeah.
And that's always been a hallmark of your style.
Yeah, you go and you slap them on the wrist and you give them a little sugar and...
Yeah, if you can get a laugh out of the table, usually the problem's over.
Yeah, and I mean, like a couple years ago, and I didn't know that Scotty had acted really bad at the horse tournament because I didn't see it until later. So anyhow, the next tournament, he's playing in my $15,000 championship at Bellagio, and right before the end of the night, he gets a penalty, and he gets up and walks off. I say, Scotty, just come in 20 minutes late tomorrow, because you got a penalty. He didn't say a word. But if I'd let him get away with it like other places did, then they just push and push and push.
Right.
And then one of my favorite sayings is, if you let the inmates run the asylum, there's no need for you.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have control.
Well, just like with children, they're going to push to see what they can get away with, and then they're going to learn where the line is.
And poker players are... very adolescent sometimes. I mean, to be, you guys are both champion poker players, and
Go ahead.
And to be a champion poker player, that especially in tournaments, number one thing is being aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're aggressive, you might go through several $1 million, but you're going to win a tournament once in a while.
Right.
And what happens is they can't turn it off when they get into real life.
Mm-hmm.
They're aggressive with the valet parker. They're aggressive with the front desk. They're aggressive with everybody.
Right, with the dealer.
And most people just don't want to deal with it.
Right.
And which is another one of the reasons why you have very few high limit successful poker rooms, because if you got a high limit slot player and they're upset about something, and they go to their host.
Right.
You know, if you have a high limit blackjack player, they might get to the casino manager.
Yeah.
If you have a high limit poker player that's upset about something, I want to see Bobby Baldwin. You know,
Right.
and most of these other casinos, they just don't want to deal with it.
Right. You mentioned when you first put in the penalty system, this just makes me think, what was it like before there were instituted penalties? Would the players settle things, or you just argue for 40 minutes?
I lost a lot of sleep.
Yeah.
And I lost a lot of employees. And I was a player a lot of the time. I started in the business in '76, but in the early '80s I fell in love with the tournaments, and I started playing probably 200 little tournaments around town. And I was always going home to my wife and say, they run these tournaments so bad. This table's 9-handed, we're 4-handed. They don't. You know. So my wife Alma, who's she was pretty sharp, and she could have a little sharp tongue at times too. She said, "Well, if you're such a genius, why don't you go around them?" Mm-hmm. So 26 years later, here I am.
Thanks for joining us on The Scoop, brought to you by Full Tilt Poker. And we'll be back with Jack McClelland for more on our next episode. Write to us at thescoop@cardplayer.com.
I see you. Your eyes. Your hands. Your chips. Everything. So I don't need to see your cards. We play at fulltiltpoker.com.